We are all surfers in the ocean of life. Each of us are riding the waves in our own and unique way. This book, Surfing Tales, is my own journey in learning how to surf with life. In this book, I'm going to talk about many different experiences. I will pay tribute to my fellow surfers who are no longer with us. I will talk about my journeys, both outward and inner. I feel so fortunate to be alive. This life is an incredible blessing. This book talks about my major joys in life. They are surfing and meditation. These are hobbies for me. I hope you enjoy this book. Some will probably like it, while others may ho-hum it. We are all so different, yet we are the same. And that's a paradox. Yes, life is a paradox. The older I get, I see that our intelligence would never go far. It's only when we combine intelligence and the heart together can we understand the secrets of life. So I hope you enjoy riding this wave.
When I was in fifth grade, my parents took us to Europe. It was so incredible to see the countries that I learned in school. We saw the ancient Colosseum, the Forum, Vaticans, catacombs in Rome, in Paris, the Eiffel Tower. We went to France, Italy, and Switzerland. I have incredible memories of that trip. My love for different cultures really began to blossom. Each country was so different and unique. I loved the smells, the food, and the different customs. Europe was so different than life in the States. I love to see the vast differences. This impression carries with me today. I love the diversity of life. I love meeting new people, cultures, and different lifestyles. We are all so different, yet at the same time, our essence is the same. Ultimately, we are the same. We come from the same Creator. I remember in the sixth grade, my brother and I received a series of exercises from my father. My dad drew each exercise on a brown piece of paper. It was enclosed in a brown folder. At that time, my dad said these exercises came from the Air Force. I practiced these exercises for many years. When I began to study yoga, I found out these exercises were really yoga postures. It wasn't until 20 years later that my dad told me that he had a yoga teacher in the early 60s. Those exercises came from my dad's teacher. It was kind of funny. For years, my dad couldn't understand my brother and I. When he found out that both of us were on the same wavelength, we both laughed. It was kind of funny that years later, I realized that the exercises my dad taught me were the foundation of the exercises I do today. Even back then, I was guided in learning about ancient postures which create good health to the body. I did not have any formal teachers, but my brother and I did these exercises every day. To this day, it is a foundation for my physical health. I was lucky as a child. My parents were conscious of the foods we ate. We weren't vegetarian, but our diet was excellent. Our diet consisted of vegetables, grains, fruits, and poultry. We only had soda pop for Christmas and Easter. We had some junk food, but fortunately it was controlled. My body thrived on good, wholesome food. These habits were easily incorporated into my life later on. As a child, my brother and I would go to bed between 7:30 and 8 o'clock every night. Our bodies naturally followed the rhythms of life. Consequently, we hardly ever got sick. I was probably out sick for a week total my whole 12 years in school. Subconsciously, my life was directed to a healthy lifestyle. My mom said you can go to bed as late as you want, knowing that we'd be so tired around 8 o'clock and we would just fall asleep. I remember my mom kissing us goodnight, and we would fall asleep before she got out the door. I believe that everything is contained in our DNA. I feel at a young age, I tapped into the past where I had this spiritual upbringing where the human body is divine. At this time, none of my friends could relate to this. This is another factor that we can listen and find guidance from within. We are never alone. I remember one event which totally changed my life. In 6th grade, my brother and I had a paper route. My brother wanted to buy a surfboard. My parents said, "Save your money and you can." At that time, I didn't care one way or the other. On Christmas Day in 7th grade, my parents gave us money towards a brand new surfboard. From that moment on, something clicked in my consciousness. It took us only 3 months to buy our new boards. We bought a Gordy surfboard in Huntington Beach. These boards were priceless for my brother and I. My father would take us after school and on weekends. My life from then on was of the sea. I felt totally at home. All my problems would disappear into the ocean. My happiest moments in junior high school and high school revolved around the ocean. It's hard to explain the excitement of riding a wave. Such joy and happiness comes from this experience. As a child, surfing was a form of meditation for me. I would love to wake up early in the morning and my dad would drive us to the beach. I loved the early mornings. It was a spiritual experience to be in the ocean and experience the harmony of nature. During my summer of my 7th grade, my brother and I would be dropped off at a beach called Big Corona. We would surf for 5 hours, and then we would paddle home about 4 miles. We would arrive home exhausted, and my dad sometimes made homemade pizza for lunch. We had a great summer. Surfing taught me to leave all my troubles on land and to be in the majesty of the ocean. The ocean was a great place for healing. It was alive. I will never forget my first wave riding a surfboard. My dad gave my brother and me a surfing lesson from the famous surfer of the time, Mickey Munoz. We got out of school early one day and drove 45 minutes south to a beach named Doheny. We waxed our boards and paddled out to the waves. I remember when it was my turn, Mickey Munoz gently pushed me into a small wave. It was probably 1 foot, but this 1 foot wave gave me such an exhilaration. I felt I was riding a 10-foot wave. Inside I was screaming, "Yes, yes, Yes, there was so much joy and bliss that I knew I was hooked. Surfing from that moment on became part of my life. Years later, I feel so grateful with my connection with surfing in the sea. It literally saved my life. It was my home and refuge. It was a place on earth where I could go and be alone with myself. I developed a strong bond with the sea. Surfing at that time represented our primordial roots with life. All life is based upon water. Without water, our whole world would die. How incredible that human beings can ride the waves of life. We take it so much for granted. I feel that without surfing, I probably never would have survived my teenage years. Surfing was a vehicle to experience something far greater than I learned in schools. It touched the very source of life itself. I needed in my life practical ways to experience the glories of life, and surfing would provide me with that experience. I knew as a youth that we're all going through the motions of life. We were taught to memorize and not to question our existence. So many times the dreamers would get scolded, "That's how it is. Don't ask questions, just carry on." Surfing allowed me to ask questions and to experience the wonders of life. I knew I was protected and my life was on track. Years later, I realized that surfing brought me in contact with Gaia, the Mother Earth. I could go surfing and all the troubles of life would go away. The planet is alive and conscious. I learned this at a young age. Surfing brought me the experience that the ocean is alive. It communicates to you by the power of love. Talk to any surfer and they will say the same thing. Maybe they can't put words to it, but they will agree that the ocean is a marvelous place. One experience I remember in 8th grade was every day I would see this girl named Patty Tucker going down the hall between the 4th or 5th class. We would simply smile at each other. I took her to the Sadie Hawkins dance. Years later, I saw her at our 20th reunion and both of us remembered how powerful that experience was. It's amazing how some experiences get carried along with you the rest of your life. I'm sure years later, this experience will linger. How powerful we are humans. Just a mere look and no words can generate such a powerful experience. Our feeling was an interconnectedness. It was beyond boy and girl. It was a simple recognition that we are alive and we both recognize the beauty of it. It was beyond words. Not one word was ever spoken between us in that hallway. How incredible, years later, I can still feel the magic of those moments. In 9th grade, my brother and I went out for cross country and track. I didn't really excel until the 10th grade. Then I was unbeatable. I won every race of the track season. I remember how incredible running was. It was such a rush. My brother and I could run 10 miles in an hour. Running put me in such a trance. At times I felt I was on top of the world. Each step was a living experience of the power of life surging through me. I remember one technique I learned on my own was to breathe through my nose as long as I could during the race. I ran the 13:20 3/4 of a mile. I would usually run 2 laps through my nose, and the last lap I would run as fast as I could through my mouth. I would usually win by a long shot. I remember my last track meet before the finals. I won my event, yet according to some rule, I could be challenged the next day. The following day, I had to run against runners who've been running varsity all year round. I knew that it would be very hard to run the next day. It usually took a few days to fully recover. I ran a respectable race but didn't qualify. That summer, I got totally involved in disc surfing. When the school year began, I decided not to go out for track and cross country. My cross country coach came to my house to try to change my mind, but my mind was changed. My love was surfing. It was kind of funny how leaving cross country and track, my relationship between those two coaches changes. I knew they were disappointed. I was so-called blacklisted from them. I never had the communication we once had. It's amazing how as humans we make decisions, and if they don't agree with your superiors, then they withdraw and no more take interest in you. I still have fond memories of these coaches. I made a choice on my own with pressure coming from parents and coaches. Surfing was really a great part of my life. One of my fondest memories in high school was each year we would have exchange students from Argentina come and leave in the students' home for a month. Each day there would be an after-school activity. We had for 3 years students from Argentina and 1 year a student from Ecuador for 1 year. I remember such great social get-togethers. There was no drugs or alcohol, just good music and dancing. It was a great way for different cultures to get together. I have fond memories getting to know members of the group. Upon leaving, we would always write. I remember one girl named Graciela de Orio. She was an Italian girl. I met her in 9th grade. She was 3 years older than me. It was amazing how mature she was. In our society, a junior would never talk and be social with a 9th grader. She became a good member of our family. My sister Jane went and spent some time with her. I went 3 years later. I really appreciated the manners the Argentines had. They were really representatives of their country and culture. In my junior year, we had Eduardo Pena from Ecuador come and stay at our house. Eduardo became a great member of our family. One of my most memorable surf experiences was going to the Hollister Ranch near Santa Barbara. The ranch was 25 miles of the best waves in California, and it was private. The only way to get in was by boat. One of my brothers and I, childhood friends, was Joyce Caldwell. Her father was president of the Macro Corporation, which owned the place. Her father would give us passes to go there. This place was one of the most beautiful places in the world. Wildflowers were all over the place. At this time, no development was on this property. It was so beautiful driving in there. The waves were so incredible. My brother and I spent 3 years going there. The ranch was every surfer's dream in California. I'll never forget my first trip there. My brother and I drove down from Newport Beach to Santa Barbara. We stayed at our grandparents' overnight. The following day, we drove north 45 minutes to the entrance of the Hollister Ranch. The drive into the ranch was probably one of the most scenic drives I've ever seen. It was a one-lane road going through an incredible countryside. The hills were green with incredible wildflowers everywhere. The road passed through beach breaks, point breaks, and reef breaks. This is one of the last uncontaminated frontiers in California. My brother and I were overwhelmed by the beauty. The waves were incredible. My brother and I were the only ones out. We could pick any break we desired. My favorite break was a spot called rights and lefts. The wave was a perfect wave. As soon as you took off, the wave lined up perfectly. It broke on a reef with a rocky shell. The wave was perfect for tube riding. My brother and I were in heaven. We felt so fortunate. Here we were all alone in one of the best surf spots in California. Years later, in my high school reunion, I saw Joyce and told her my best experience in high school was surfing the ranch. I told Joyce be sure to thank her dad on behalf of my brother and I. My twin brother and I were very close. My brother was more than a brother. He was my friend. It was a blessing growing up with him. We had such incredible times. Both of us realized our life was special. I owe a lot to my family. Both my mom and dad supported us. I have a younger brother and an older sister. I felt we were a close-knit family. We had all our share of good times. The highlights as a kid was going to Disneyland. We would probably go there twice a year all throughout my childhood. Disneyland represented to me as a child heaven on earth. The place was spotless. I had fond memories of our family outings. I loved when we would go to the beach and have picnics. My dad was an incredible cook and so was my mom. We had a lot of ethnic foods. We would always try out new restaurants. All our family loved trying out new cuisines. My dad worked at home the majority of our childhood.
Joyce Caldwell. I have known Joyce since 5th grade. She always been kind to my brother and I. For example, she knew my brother and I loved to surf. Her dad was a member of the Mackerel Corporation, who at that time owned the Hollister Ranch, or known as simply the best surfing spot in California. It was on private property, and you needed permission to get in. If you had a boat, it took probably around an hour to boat it. Joyce was kind enough to ask her dad, and he said yes. My brother and I went to Joyce's house and met her dad. My first impression was, wow, what a kind man. He had such a kind demeanor. So this is where Joyce gets her kindness from. I never met Joyce's mom, but I knew Joyce's brother Scott, and he had the same kind demeanor as the rest of the family. How kind was it for Joyce to ask her dad? She didn't get anything out of it. She was kind and didn't think about herself. Same goes for Joyce's dad. The Mackerel Corporation owned the place and could have said absolutely no. You're too young. We were only 16 years old. But her dad was kind. I felt he included my brother and I part of his family. He trusted us and gave us permission. My brother and I had many great adventures surfing their ranch. Imagine given the keys to heaven. This is what it was like. We surfed a place that was so pristine. During the spring, there were incredible wildflowers. My brother and I were awestruck by the beauty. At night, thousands of stars were in the sky. At times, we were the only ones on this beach for miles. We could pick and choose whatever surf break we wanted. Years later, each time I see Joyce, I thank her and her dad for such a precious gift. Kindness goes a long ways. One incident that still remains to this day is the following. One day, while we were in high school, my dear friend Mark Blackburn and his uncle Carl took my brother on a boat ride. It takes probably half an hour to reach the ocean from where we took off in the harbor. We got off the harbor, we moved left to where we were directly off Big Corona, where my brother and I surfed as a kid. We were sitting there, and all of a sudden, we feel this tremendous rush in energy with thousands of bubbles underneath the boat. It's kind of scary. Finally, this huge well emerges to the surface, probably 10 feet away. When I saw its eyes, it was such an incredible sight. Pure wisdom, kindness,
compassion, and supreme intelligence. This day's probably 46 years later, I can still vision this in my mind's eye. I always was in love with dolphins and whales, but to see one in the wild like this was truly a gift. I could sense and see the magnificence of such a beautiful creature of God. If he wanted to, he could completely destroy the boat, but that's not its nature. We need to learn from the dolphins and whales in our lives. They have so much we can learn from. I was fortunate enough to avoid drugs and alcohol in high school. All my friends were totally into it. I drank probably 2 beers and tried pot a few times. My addiction to life was the ocean. The ocean taught me about living. My best state was in harmony with nature. I didn't need some artificial high. I still blended in it with my friends. I wouldn't compromise my values. In my senior year of high school, I became a vegetarian. Our high school had a 10-week elective course on yoga, which I took. I love practicing yoga. Yoga and surfing was so closely tied together. I would wake up around 4:30 in the morning and do my exercises, meditate, and then go surfing. In high school, I hardly went to parties. I would go to bed early and wake up early. During the summer of my junior year, my brother and I went to South America. We went to Argentina, Brazil, and Ecuador. Our first stop was Brazil. A good surfing friend, Steve LaMontagne, had a roommate in college. He was Chinese and lived in Brazil. John invited us to visit him and his family in Rio de Janeiro. His family owned a Chinese restaurant. This is the first time I ever lived inside a Chinese household. Each morning we have a delicious bowl of soup. This was standard for breakfast. My brother and I loved the Brazilian culture. We went to Christ the Redeemer atop Mount Corcovado and were captured by the incredible view of Copacabana and Ipanema. We saw the dire poverty of the shantytown. I don't think you really ever get over when you see poverty of this kind. Human beings for thousands of years had to live in such an existence. My brother and I visited Cabo Frio, a small beach town with 3 to 4 hours from Rio. It was off-season. We met a beautiful Portuguese family, and they showed us around this town. It was wintertime in Brazil. It was probably in the low 60s. Cold for Brazil. We stayed a month in Argentina. There was a small group from our high school who was exchange students. I stayed with Pedro de Sena and his family. Pedro stayed with us 2 years before. In Argentina, they have café con leche, coffee and milk and croissants for breakfast. This is the first time I ever tried coffee. The croissants were served with butter and jam. The Argentine family was really nice and treated me like a member of their family. Meat is king in Argentina. I was amazed to see that streetcar vendors would serve steak sandwiches. You had better be adventuresome if you go to a barbecue. I visited a family that took me to their ranch in the Pampas. The cowboys provided an authentic Argentine barbecue. In Argentina, they eat parts of the cow that Americans would never eat. My brother and I had a Forrest Gump moment. We were taking a tour of this government building. They had a person giving a tour in Spanish and I was told to translate in English. We entered this one room and saw a window, and two people were playing chess. One of the players was Bobby Fischer, one of the greatest players in the world. We stayed for only one moment, and then the tour then continued. I think back now in my eye, it was a historical moment in chess history, and we nonchalantly nod our heads and go along our merry way. The Argentines drive like crazy. I thought I drove radically. They would drive fast and furious. Imagine driving down the street at 90 miles per hour and not stopping at stop signs or street signs. If you got a ticket, they would give a bribe to the officer. If you're going to a nightclub or party, it would start around midnight. Nobody ever came on time. A 16-year-old could go to a nightclub and order a shot of whiskey. The most important aspect of their society was family and friends. This was the backbone of life. Yes, the job was important, but it was a great balance between the two. They knew their priorities in life. The bus service in Argentina was first class. We took a bus from Buenos Aires to Mar del Plata. Imagine the same service you would get on a first class ticket on an airplane. The service was incredible. I stayed with Graciela de Orio, a friend of our family. Mar del Plata is a seaside resort. There is a grand casino overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. We spent about 4 days there. Surfing was a new spot there. I never had the opportunity to go. When I was there, it was freezing. We partied with our family and friends and took a plane to Ecuador. We stayed with Eduardo Peña and his family. Eduardo stayed with us for 1 year before. He was an exchange student. As you can probably see, I love different kinds of ethnic foods. Eduardo had a housekeeper who made the best taquitos in the world, smoothies. She made all sorts of exotic fruits into a delicious drink, mangoes, bananas, papaya, and many others I can't recall. I remember eating fried plantains with rice. Eduardo's family had a friend named Victorio Pesado, a famous Spanish bull fighter who was a surfer. He would take my brother and I to surf trips to Playas. It was about a 2-hour journey from Guayaquil. Playas was a sleepy beach town. They had this small but long lake that broke along the point. My brother and I could see its potential. The beach town resort was known for its fresh fish. It was a delightful time spending time with Victorio and his family. We went several times with him to Playas. Eduardo took my brother and I to Quito and Cuenca. In Cuenca, we stayed at his grandmother's house. It was a beautiful place. We were there during the winter, and there was no heating. Brr, it was cold. Cuenca is a city in the southern Andes Mountains. Temperatures are around 58 degrees year-round. Lately, a lot of Americans have moved there to take advantage of the great standard of living. While in Ecuador, we heard the Ecuadorian Navy allowed tourists to go on tour with them to the Galapagos Islands. We called our parents a few days before school was to start. My parents said it would be okay, but they had to talk to our teachers and principal. We received a phone call a few hours later saying it was all right. Our principal said we would learn more traveling than in school. We came back to school 3 weeks later. The Galapagos Islands was a trip of a lifetime. We went on this old U.S. Navy World War II ship. At this time, there was a tuna boat war between Ecuador and the United States. The Ecuadorian Navy was looking for U.S. tuna boats. We visited Santiago, San Cristobal, Isabel, Fernando, and Isabel Islands. While there, I could see why Darwin came up with his theory of evolution. The Galapagos Islands at that time wasn't a tour destination. They contained one of the only giant tortoises populations in the world. My brother and I were amazed by the size and age of these incredible creatures. I have pictures of seals jumping over my head. My brother said, "You had to wait for them, watch for the mom and dad. They were huge and would chase you out of the water and run after you." I remember vividly looking at the waves, and I counted over a minute while it broke perfectly. No one had ever ridden this way. I saw years later they now have surf excursions to this beautiful place. The first time my brother and I saw iguanas, we were standing at the same spot, looking at the waves, and we sensed something was looking at us. We looked around, and there were hundreds of iguanas who were looking at us. They were completely camouflaged. The Navy personnel were very kind to us. There was a couple from the U.S. and a poet from Argentina on board. We learned a lot about nature. It would be hard not to. Never before have I been in such a pristine environment. During my senior year, I decided to put off college for a while and travel and surf around the world. I had another objective in mind also. I wanted to find a teacher who could reveal to me the experience of my true self. I had glimpses in my life of a life more brilliant than the noonday sun. I knew that God was light. I wanted conscious and direct experience. I wanted tools in my life where I could achieve 24 hours a day connection with the source of life itself. I prayed to God to be shown. I knew there were teachers who had the ability to reveal that experience and unlock that door. After the door was opened, it would be up to me to cultivate that experience. I worked at a grocery store after school on the weekends. I graduated from high school and went on a surfing trip to Mexico for a few weeks. Before I went to Europe, I spent 2 weeks at a yoga camp in Nevada City in Northern California. I had a wonderful time at that yoga camp. The owner of the camp was Kriyananda, the disciple of Yogananda. Yogananda was a famous Indian Swami who died in 1952. Kriyananda was one of his disciples. My fond memories were in the temple late at night. I would meditate late at night and would have these incredible visions inside. I was bathed in a blue light. I felt such a relationship with nature. I felt my life was incredible and that everything was being unfolded. Up to this point in time, I really didn't have the ability to tap into the meditation experience at will. It was a lot of hit and miss. At this yoga camp was the first time I was in an atmosphere where people were consciously trying to experience the source of light. I learned some valuable techniques. I felt such a peace inside of my being. My mind was slowly coming down to a halt. It's kind of funny, without meditation, a human being doesn't realize how powerful the mind is. I remember the first time I closed my eyes and realized a battle was in my hands. It would take patience and work, but it was sure worth it. I spent 2 weeks there and took a plane from Oakland, California to Europe. I went with my high school buddy, Craig Perkins. Craig was a great person to be around. He had a great sense of humor. We hitchhiked from Germany to Denmark. We were looking for a friend named Carter Robinson. We arrived at the dock where Carter lived and found out his boat left a few days earlier. The person told us where they might be for a few days. We hitchhiked to the city and found Carter. It was quite the surprise. He stayed for about a week. They were planning to go to Norway for a while. They asked us if we wanted to go, but we declined. Carter had a guest named Brad Crow, who was an old friend of mine. We grew up together. After leaving Carter, Craig and I went back to Germany. Craig took a plane back to the 60s. Years later, I don't know exactly what happened. On the subconscious level, I wanted to be my own for the first time in my life. Craig will always be a friend. I haven't seen him for more than 23 years. I took a train to Biarritz, France, where my adventure began. My first week in France, I camped out in the woods near La Barre, a famous surf spot. Each day I would go surfing. I met this American named Peter Lingo, and we became good friends. He was also a surfer. He invited me to stay with him in his tent. He had a huge tent that was staying in the campground overlooking the bar. He also had a car, which helped get around. Both of us didn't smoke, drink, or take drugs. We got some incredible surf. I felt great. We went surfing all over the place. One of my fond memories was driving to this old bakery in the countryside. The views were incredible. The bakery was the same for hundreds of years. They had a stream running through which grounded the wheat. The smells that emanated from that place were truly out of this world. I remember eating these sugar cookies. The people in this part of France were friendly.
Craig Perkins. Craig and I became friends during my junior year of high school. Craig has a great sense of humor. I remember one time my brother and I went on a mountain excursion to a mountain park in the mountains of Orange County. There was a small trail on this cliff. The trail was probably under 2 feet wide. Well, my brother and I were petrified of crossing this. I remember walking very slowly and conscious of every step. My brother John did the same. And here comes Craig, dancing to the tune of Tiptoes to the Tulips. He would kick one foot over the hill edge and then do the same thing to his other foot. It was quite the sight to see. Craig loved the ocean. He was quite the surf photographer. He had a great cannon for its time. Craig was a kneeboarder. He could ride his kneeboard at the Newport Beach famous break the wedge on a big day. I haven't seen Craig in many years. I heard he's living in Mexico. My brother bumped into him in San Diego in the late 90s. He was in a fast food restaurant and my brother heard Craig's voice. That was a giveaway. That was the last time we heard from him.
While I was in France, one day I woke up and saw huge waves breaking. The waves were probably 15 feet high. The surf spot was at La Barre, a famous but now extinct surf spot. I took off on a huge wave, stood up, and the next moment I was free falling down the wave. Back then, there were no leashes. My board got carried to shore. La Barre had a jetty, and there were 15-foot waves breaking on the rocks. The rip was so strong, it was like a river. For the first time in my life, I said, Lord, if you exist, you had better do something real fast. I closed my eyes and saw an incredible light and a small Indian boy. The next moment, I was on shore. Everybody on shore said it was a miracle. The next day, I decided to go to India. As I look back at that experience, I felt the hand embraced my life. I felt so protected. Here I was only 18 years old, but I knew my life was protected. I was about to start the adventure of a lifetime. This is definitely a near-death experience for me. In the early 70s, I read books about the death experience, and my experience closely resembled that experience. I saw a great light which filled my being with bliss that is boundless. I saw a figure which told me without words that everything would be all right. This experience I knew could be experienced consciously. It didn't have to be a hit or miss affair. I knew a human being could experience the source directly, no matter if he or she were dreaming, sleeping, dreaming, or in the wake state. Man had the ability to tap into the source of life. After my surfing accident, Peter and I started our trip to India. I was very excited. I knew that something wonderful was going to happen in India. All my dreams would run true. We drove from Biarritz to Venice, where we stayed 2 days with an Italian friend from high school. We drove through Yugoslavia. At that time, it was a communist country. The people at that time were very suspicious of outsiders. They weren't very friendly. The countryside was amazing. We were high up in the mountains and could see the Mediterranean Sea. Peter would drive and he had this harmonica he would play. He was actually a good player. We drove to Athens in Greece. We spent a week there. I loved going to the Parthenon. Here I was in the cradle of such an incredible civilization. I was in awe. We sold our car and took an airplane to Turkey. When we landed in Istanbul, I knew this is where East meets West. The city was so different. The Muslim mosques were so beautiful. The policemen had submachine guns. I never saw that before. I remember staying at this house where a lady came in and said we had better leave because the police was going to raid the place. She said people used drugs and the police were going to bust the place. I felt someone taking care of me. I didn't want to end up in a Turkish jail, especially because I don't use drugs. That would be hard to prove in Turkey. We spent a week in Istanbul and then went to Ankara. In Ankara we had to stay a week because the border was closed. The Shah of Iran was having the 1,000-year anniversary party for Persia. He didn't want young Westerners or trouble to come to his land for this party. I heard that the Shah even built props to hide the poverty. I had a friend who went to the party and said it was quite the affair. They had air-conditioned tents. The Shah spent thousands of dollars. While in Ankara, we saw the Queen of England in a parade. There were thousands of soldiers carrying submachine guns. After a week, the border was open and we took trains and buses to Iran. It was quite a scene traveling. Both Peter and I carried our surfboards and our packs. The trains were quite dirty and packed. We slept on the floor of the train. The buses were like the trains, but they had livestock on board. I was getting quite a lesson on life. We arrived at the capital of Tehran. Tehran was quite a beautiful city. We found out that a week before, a young American tourist died the week before. Supposedly she entered a Muslim mosque and was stoned to death. The reason was that only Muslims could go inside the temple. I met a man from the secret police. He came up to me and said that he killed about 30 Americans this year. In Iran, if they find drugs in you, they would shoot you on the spot. What a way to control the drug problem. We then took buses to the border of Afghanistan. This is where the scenery drastically changed. I felt I was transferred back 2,000 years ago. The Afghan people are warriors. Their culture is the same for thousands of years. We were in a high mountain desert. Everyone carried guns or rifles. This is way before the Soviet invasion. I felt I was in a Wild West town. There was no law or order. The people were quite nice, but I knew you didn't want to cross them up. The people in Afghanistan smoked a lot of hash. They used this drug like alcohol. The whole nation used it. The food was quite good. We took a bus from the border and made it to Kabul. Along the way, we bumped into this lion named Charlie Krishna. Charlie was a great guy and we traveled together. Kabul at this time was a hangout for the European hippies. The Europeans were heavily involved in drugs. They used a lot of opium. It was quite sad to see people my age totally addicted to opium. There's nothing I could do. Many of them simply wasted away. The drug was very cheap and could be bought anywhere. I knew a lot of my friends in the States would have loved to be in that environment. It was an eye-opening experience. For the first time, I saw so many kids totally wasted and hanging on to life with a thread. They were thousands of miles from home. During this time, I would meditate every day. I knew something incredible was going to happen to me in India. I just had the intuition that my dreams would come true. I wish I would meet someone who could show me the way to open the door. I felt totally protected. It's a beautiful feeling to know that someone is watching over you. I was thousands of miles away from home, and yet I felt great inside. I felt protected. My main goal was to get to India. Ever since I left France, that feeling kept on getting stronger. I felt such a wave and anticipation that my dreams will come true. I had only a short time and it would be shown to me. I left Kabul and took the Khyber Pass from Afghanistan into Pakistan. The Khyber Pass was used by Genghis Khan. It is one of the oldest trade routes in the world. Throughout history, it has been an important trade route between Central Asia and India. What a radical road. It was all dirt, which most of Afghanistan was. There was no guardrails, and we had these crazy drivers driving as fast as they could down the pass. The buses were quite different. Each bus would have a different altar depending on which religion they belonged to. There would be flowers, incense, pictures, and memorabilia. We would be driving down this huge mountain on a skinny road. This was the one and only route from Afghanistan to Pakistan. Well, we finally made it to Pakistan. Lahore was a busy city. We only stayed for a few days. When I was in Pakistan, I saw signs saying Crush India. When I arrived in India, I saw sayings Crush Pakistan. I arrived at the border of India at the beginning of the Indian-Pakistan War. The following day, the border was closed for 5 years. My first day in India was incredible. I remember crossing the border. At this time, there was a 2-mile walk to reach the border, check for India. There were parrots and wild birds everywhere. I felt such a strong spiritual experience. I was home. It's hard to put into words what I was feeling. I knew something incredible was to happen to me in India. I was looking for a teacher who would give me a practical experience of who I was. I remember being checked by an Indian custom lady who was famous for busting people for bringing in drugs into India. Since I didn't use drugs, I wasn't worried. I remember such an aura of peace that came over me. The sun was just setting, and the whole forest was alive. Thousands of parrots were in the forest. The smell was like an incredible perfume in the air. I crossed the border and took an overnight train to New Delhi. When I got to New Delhi, I was very tired and exhausted. I heard rumors that the Sikhs allowed people to stay at their temple. I went to this huge Sikh temple. I asked, "Can I stay here overnight?" The man said no, but there's a huge festival going on down the block. The festival is for Maharaji, a 13-year-old boy who just came back from a tour of the West. I remember 4 months earlier reading about him in Time magazine and from my sister. I was intrigued how a 13-year-old boy could have such a huge following. I arrived at the festival site and was escorted to the stage where 1 million people were sitting. It was amazing, a sea of people. The next thing I knew, a young Indian boy walked on the stage wearing a Krishna outfit. He was wearing a gold crown with jewels and a gold outfit. I was laughing and crying at the same time. Something inside of me knew I was home, that the experience I was looking for could be shown by this Indian boy. Being 18 years old, I was very practical that I wanted a direct experience of God inside of me. What this young Indian boy said made sense. He said, "Seeing is believing." If I told you an ant was 10 feet tall, would you believe me? But if I showed you, seeing is believing. He said, "Don't believe in my words. Take my experience. See for yourself. If it suits your practice, if not, go on your way." At this time of my life, this made sense. I have never heard someone saying, "I can reveal who you really are." All my teachers in the past said, "Believe, and maybe someday you will have that experience." Raji said, "Take that experience, practice it, and let the seed bloom into a fruit tree." The following day, I packed up my bags and took a train to Brahmnagar. Maraji's ashram is near Hardwar. It's a small town in the foothills of the Himalayas. The next 2 weeks I listened to discourses about this knowledge. Something inside of me knew that it was to receive the experience of a lifetime. I knew the door to my soul was to be opened. Words are hard to express the feeling that was going inside of my being. I knew that in a short time I'd be shown and would reveal the secret of life itself. I knew this experience was real. I talked to a lot of people who had the experience. I could tell and sense that something wonderful was going on. I liked the idea that the proof is in the pudding. I didn't want to join a cult or religious group. I just wanted a direct and continuous experience of the power that's keeping me alive. I knew through practice this could be achieved. During this time, the war between India and Pakistan was going on. Each night there were air raid sirens going on, and off in the distance we could hear bombs going off. There was a general blackout at night. Pakistani bombers were only miles away. Air raid sirens were heard in the distance. At the ashram, the whole place was so serene, while this part of the world, people were dying. Trains of Pakistanis were being massacred going from India to Pakistan, and trainloads of Indians were being massacred going from Pakistan into India. Such a dichotomy. I'll never forget my initiation. There were probably about 20 of us in a small room. Maraji had initiators who revealed his knowledge. We were in the room while Maraji was playing on top of the roof directly overhead of us. This experience that I had that day still sends shivers of joy, just merely the thought. The first technique the initiator revealed was the light technique. I always knew that the human being had the ability to see the light inside. This is an actual experience. When the initiator touched my forehead, I felt this incredible surge of energy. I knew at that point that something incredible was going to happen. My whole body and soul sensed it. My consciousness completely left this physical existence. A golden circle of light appeared. Inside of this circle, a brilliant blue star appeared. This golden circle of light and this blue star was so beautiful. It's probably the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. Waves of love, joy, and peace were surging inside my consciousness. All of a sudden, the star transferred into a ray, a tunnel of blue light, which went on for infinity. I merged with the blue ray. It's very hard to describe this experience. I was at home. The doors were open. I was given the keys, and it was up to me to cultivate that experience. I have definite proof that we are more than these bodies. All of a sudden, the mystery of life was revealed. I knew the secrets behind our religion. There was a genuine experience that could be shown and experienced. Years later, I realized that this experience was initiation into Lord's Michael Blu-ray. It was the Jacob's Ladder. This experience was the ladder to God. To this day, I'll never forget this experience. It gave me practical proof that God exists. I knew it, but this was a practical experience. It was more real than any outside human experience. I knew my life was on track. I waited years to go home. I was shown such a glorious place. When I returned to this body and regained physical consciousness, my whole body was shaking like a dot. My body had a hard time. Can you imagine being hooked up to the power plant of the whole universe? I knew no damage was done. Over time, I knew that the body was built and designed to handle these kinds of currents. Day by day, through meditation, man can slowly harmonize with these frequencies and begin to vibrate at this frequency. There were 3 other techniques that were revealed. One was the music technique. I was shown how to listen to the innermost frequencies of life. Since God is energy, man has the capability to be in tune and listen to subtle yet energy frequencies. Different religions have different concepts about this experience. By listening to this music over time, man is filled with such a joy and peace in his life. The mind slowly begins to slow down. In this state, man gets in contact with an energy frequency that is infinite. This energy is pure love and bliss. The whole universe is comprised of this energy. It was, is, and will always be. This is the Word of God. Every major religion talks about the Word in some form or another. This is a very simple technique where man can be in direct communication with the subtle energy. When a person first receives this initiation, the Word is very subtle. The majority of people really don't understand the power of this Word. I know a lot of people who took this experience and never really tried it out. Over time, I can consciously put myself in direct communication with this Word. My whole being is instantly filled with such a wave of love and bliss. I'm not there 24 hours a day, but I know it's possible. I have had experiences that I was completely taken out of this physical world and taken into a place where there's no time and space. The only thing existed was this incredible energy of love. I know I was at home with my Father. This energy exists throughout all creation. It exists in the manifest and unmanifest. It exists throughout time and space and beyond. All of creation came from this Word. In the Bible in St. John, the verse goes like this: in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. Human beings have the capability to tune into this experience. The last experience was one of the living waters or nectar experience. When man is in this experience, powerful hormones and enzymes are secreted through the endocrine system. Through the ages, man has learned that he has a capability to actually experience this nectar or living water. Just one drop of this is an incredible, powerful experience. One drop has the capability to take man's consciousness into a definite, altered state. This fluid is very cleansing to the body. When Christ was in the desert for 40 days and nights, he lived off this manna. This experience is energy in its subtle form. It is energy, yet it transmutes itself into matter. This experience is very powerful to the endocrine system. I've had numerous experiences of this nectar. It's probably the most intoxicating drug known in the universe. Unlike a drug which has side effects, this experience is completely beneficial to the body and soul. These experiences reveal over time who we truly are. We are more than our mind or body. We are in fact the source of life. Each one of us are part of this universal consciousness. We just don't remember it. It's amazing when we were born, we came from the source. Our whole body was this consciousness. Over time, we forgot. Years later, we have completely forgot of our true existence. After the initiation, I thank my Creator for revealing Himself to me. My dreams come true. I had the tools. Everything made sense to me. I could read the scriptures and understand the hidden meaning. The scriptures were at the same wavelength. I had a lot of respect for the major religions. The following day, I was sitting by the Ganges meditating when I completely lost consciousness of this planet. I saw a light more brilliant than the noonday sun. My consciousness was flowing into a river of nectar. I felt the whole Ganges River was flowing through me. Raji had a beautiful poem by Rumi, a great Sufi teacher, that sums it up. It goes like this. There is a palace in the sky without any foundation. A blind man sees a light more brilliant than a million suns. A deaf man listens to the unstruck music. A lame man climbs up a well and drinks the nectar and becomes totally intoxicated. The clincher is only a wise man understands what I'm talking about. From then on, my life was to change drastically. After my initiation and this experience, my life was never the same. I was shown something so incredible that my focus was on this experience. My whole life from then on was based upon practically cultivating this experience. Day by day, I was going deeper and deeper into my existence. My days in India were spent in meditation and spending time with Maraji. Meditation was such an incredible experience. I call it going to the movies. Day by day, I was going deeper and deeper into realms I'd never been before. Prabhnagar was such a beautiful place. I was thousands of miles away from home, and then again, I was truly at home. I was content and full of such an incredible bliss. My mind was learning to focus on something inside of me that never changes, that was and will always be. I was learning how to be connected to that experience 24 hours a day. I practiced meditation like how I surf with joy and the thrill of riding the waves of life. To this day, I'm still blown away that this experience is lying dormant inside of humanity, just waiting to be discovered. We are searching for the jewel, and the jewel is hidden inside of each one of us. Over time, it's not all bliss and roses with this experience. I had to face my mind. The mind is such a powerful thing. It can be your friend or enemy. I learned over time to become its friend. In the beginning, at times, I thought I would go crazy. The mind was constantly chattering. I would sit for hours, and at times I wanted to get up and just forget the whole thing. But then I would break through. Then that experience would rush in and completely saturate your being. You are bliss. I felt that I had to break down the door. Over time, I walked through the door, and my mind hasn't bothered me in this way since. I'm not saying my mind doesn't bother me. At times it does. But when I close my eyes or put my connection on this Word of God, my whole being is filled with bliss. In the beginning, it took tremendous effort to have this kind of experience. In the beginning, you meditate on the experience. Years later, that experience meditates on you. I remember that a few days before Christmas, the whole ashram took a train ride from Hardwar to Patna, a city in Bihar, India. Bihar is one of the poorest states in India. The scenery was beautiful. We were traveling on this old, funky Indian train. We could see swamps that were full of lotus flowers. Wildlife was everywhere. Raj was having a 3-day program. I remember at the festival there was probably 1 million people there. At one point in the festival, the Arya Samaj attacked the festival. I'm not sure how many people died. The group caused a lot of trouble in India. It was kind of scary to sit on stage watching fighting only a half mile away. India was quite a different place. The people were quite friendly. They liked Westerners. The Indian people in general had a strong conviction for God. Before leaving to Bihar, my friend Peter left to go back to America. I loaned him the money, which I got back in South Africa. The Westerners left in January. There were only a few of us left. I spent my remaining time in Delhi. I remember I would meditate and go into town. The Indian food was great. I bumped into the son of James Arness. His father was a famous actor in Hollywood. He played in Gunsmoke on TV. He had a son, Ralph, at the time, who was a world champion surfer. It was quite funny meeting him. I was buying a kilo of cashews for $1. I just started talking to him. During this time, Maraji was planning to go to South Africa. He needed a few Westerners to go and help set up the necessary arrangement. Somehow, Maraji's mother asked me to go. So in early February, we embarked to Bombay. While we were in Bombay one day, I was in Maraji's room, where all of a sudden he got out of his bed, stood up, and started to wave his hands towards one of his initiators, Ashoka. The hair on his whole body stood up. It looked like he put his hand in a light socket. He was yelling, "Please, Maraji, stop it." After about 20 seconds, Maraji's hand fell to his side and Ashoka was back to normal. Being an 18-year-old kid that I was, I said, "Hi, Maraji, do you want to zap him once more?" Maraji said, "Sure," and just for a fraction of a second, he raised his hand and put electricity back into him. Maraji was electrocuting him. We all laughed. This is my first time that I spent close time with Maraji. There was only a few Westerners there. It was so beautiful to play with him. At the same time, have a great respect for him.